After many days of president and parliament, early on Wednesday morning, Gabon held election for its president on Saturday. The Gabonese Election Center then declared the incumbent president, Ali Bongo, has won a third term with 64% of votes early on Wednesday morning after several days of counting. After the opposition termed the election illegitimate, the Gabonese military declared that it has taken over the nation and demanded the dissolution of all existing democratic institutions on Gabon television station. The political stability of West Africa is not at all assured by the most recent string of military coups that have occurred in former French possession throughout Africa. The extent to which yesterday's event might assist in the instability of larger area will be discussed in this video along with the post-colonial history of good relationship. Before we get started, if you haven't subscribed already, we kindly ask that you consider doing so in order to remain updated and be alerted. So let's begin with some background information. Gabon is a West African nation that was a former French colony, similar to many other nations that have lately exposed military coups. It was once regarded as one of the most politically stable nations in the area when it attained independence in 1960. Thanks to its 2.5 billion barrels of oil reserve, it was reasonably prosperous and one of the few African nations that exported more goods than it imported. In many aspects, Gabon resembles a petrol state. Even now, 45% of GDP, 60% of all government revenue, 80% of all exports came from oil. When Gabon gained its independence, there were essentially just two political parties, the Gabonese Democratic Parties, led by Léon Mumba, and the Gabonese Democratic Bloc, led by James Hiller. In 1961, Léon Mumba won the first election and was elected president of Gabon. Nonetheless, he named James Hiller as his foreign minister. The triumph of Gabon democracy was short-lived, though as Hiller replaced Mumba in a military coup in 1964. Unfortunately for Hiller, he was sentenced to 20 years of hard prison and exile when the French military stepped in favor of Mumba. This was true even though Hiller didn't appear to be part in the coup preparation and wasn't aware that it was going to happen. Mumba started to cement his control after the coup, but he passed away in 1967. His vice president, Abbas Bernard Bongo, replaced him in 1973. Bongo converted to Islam and became known as Omar Bongo. Bongo declared Gabon to be one-party state in 1968, disbanded the ruling Gabonese Democratic Bloc and founded his own party. Omar Bongo continued to govern Gabon until his passing away in 2009. To be clear, we are not claiming Bongo was a fantastic leader. Despite Gabon's huge natural riches and the country having one of the highest GDP per capita in the area, 40% of population still lives in poverty, and the young unemployment rate is about 35%. However, it is important to remember that in comparison to its neighbors, Gabon has a remarkable record of political stability, which makes Wednesday coup all more concerning. Anyway, when Bongo passed away in 2009, a presidential election was held according to reports. Ali Bongo, a former defense minister, won the election and he was re-elected in 2016. Allegations of vote manipulations and nationwide demonstration marred the election. In 2016 election, which Bongo allegedly won by less than 1%, while reportedly receiving 95% of the vote in his home region, this is a little doubt that he cheated. Now, let's fast forward to Saturday when Gabon went to poll to decide whether or not to grant Bongo a third term. This time, the alternative 2023 alliance and its presidential candidate, Abba Ondo Hassa, a former education minister under Bongo Sr., were Bongo's major rivals. Before the poll even opened, the opposition was whining about how Bongo's hastily implemented new vote system would unjustly favor the ruling party. Fear of violence were made worse by Bongo's subsequent refusal to let international observers, suspension of some foreign channels, cutting of internet access, and imposition of a countrywide curfew following the election. After more than 3 days of counting, the Gabonese Electoral Center finally declared Bongo the winner with 64% of the votes, following by Ousted with 31%. The military did not receive this claim. The Committee of Transition and Restoration of Institutions, a group of senior military officers, also declared on Gabonese TV that they have taken control, that the election result will be cancelled, and all borders will be closed until further notice. Gabon will join a growing list of Central West African nations that have lately seen coup, including Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, Sudan, and most recently Niger. This is now the most likely scenario. Obviously, this is poor news for regional stability, especially given the fact that coups subsequently lead to more coups. But unlike most of other nations on the list, Gabon is a reasonably affluent nation, which is what makes Gabon so unusual. For the most of its post-colonial existence, this had political stability.